These are going to be about the last two videos I do tonight. One of which has to do with fat acceptance issue, as well as what the CDC is now saying, and the other one has to do with the absurdity of the obscenity of breastfeeding in public places. After this, I plan to start working not just on vlogs that are long overdue, and I'm sorry to those of you who I've promised vlogs to. But I've got a lot of research to do because I want to start a series before I ever go back into like my video game series or anything of that nature, into how sex negativity in today's society is not only is it an outdated ideal system, but it's also one that hurts everybody. I'm talking men, women, and children. And it's needlessly and callously doing so. It's hurting people indiscriminately, and we're allowing it to because, as some people have put it, when it comes to reform in sex laws, well, they're not perfect, but they're what we've got. I'm sorry, that's not an answer. But let me get into this video, which is a bit of a small talk on fat acceptance. So let me get into this this article here. Overweight is okay. Study shows you can trust the CDC. Dr. Kent Sipkowitz, I know I'm going to get that wrong, you'll have to forgive me, praises the new study's honesty. Yesterday, the CDC released a study that flies in the face of public orthodox. Apparently, you can actually be too thin. That's staggering, given that for about a century now, fashion, cinema, and yes, public health organs like the CDC have, quote, made thin synonymous with beauty and health, end quote, writes Dr. Kent Sipkowitz in the Daily Beast. Quote, the route of the public by the thinocracy has been so complete that a goal other than blind pursuit of the flat stomach and sharp jaw seems sacrilegious, end quote. And I absolutely agree with that. But the heartening thing isn't that you can have a little cake. It's that the CDC is willing to, quote, be guided by data and not by preconceived notions of the message, end quote. Sipkowitz writes, unlike politics where facts, to quote Ronald Reagan, are stupid, in science, quote, facts are facts and always worth pursuing, end quote, which is why, quote, the same group of public health experts who have fought to keep America thinner was willing to stand behind the current study, end quote. Read the full post here. So you can click on the end of the article. Link will be down on the down in the underbar, and you can read the full study for yourself. Is this 100% concrete? I'm sure critics will pull this apart and say no. But the fact that it's the CDC, and not just because it's the CDC, who's willing to stand up and say, hey, you gotta knock this stuff out. We've had people who've died from becoming too thin and then trying to get their weight back. See Karen Carpenter. And people tell me I'm crazy for advocating for fat acceptance. I've seen way too much discrimination that does go on for no other reason than preconceived notions. Wages are cut for some of the bigger workers because the thought process is fat equals lazy, which equals less productivity as well as less health. And therefore, why should I pay them to do the same job that I'm paying my thin people if they're not up to snuff? No matter, even if the data shows that they can and sometimes do work just as hard, if not sometimes harder, than their thinner cohorts. But I always preface this with something that does piss off some of my overweight friends. They say you cannot place a weight limit on fat acceptance. And I say, no, that's not entirely true. Fat acceptance, yes, but with rationale. Now, that doesn't say as soon as you pass a predetermined weight limit that you are then able to be subject to discrimination, subject to whatever thought processes that people tend to go through when they look at somebody who's overweight and assume every minute detail of their life, which we're so good at. You know, if we could make an industry out of assumption, America would be #1 once again in the world. But it's one thing to tell somebody who is unhealthily overweight that they are a beautiful flower, or that they are a wonderful person as they are. Or a wonderful person, excuse me, wonderful person. And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with building self-esteem, but build it within reason. If you tell them that they are a beautiful, unique butterfly as they are, that they need to change nothing about themselves when they cannot move on their own, when they have to have people do things for them, and it's not some sort of genetic disorder like something like, say, elephantitis or other types of issues that can cause somebody to balloon up to unhealthy sizes. Telling them that is basically giving them permission to kill themselves, to do whatever they want with themselves, to eat themselves into a cardiac arrest or kill themselves, or continue to be something that is not healthy for them, is not healthy for the people around them and the people who care about them, who only want to see somebody who is, and here's the difference, who is unhealthily, by what their doctors say, when their doctors have diagnosed them as such, as being unhealthily obese. Just as there's something as being too thin, there is something as being too fat. And I do not believe in coddling somebody who needs to hear concrete truth, who needs somebody who's willing to not sugarcoat, and no, I'm not going to make that joke, not willing to sugarcoat the truth, but instead is willing to be a coach of sorts and willing to be somebody who these people can lean on, but who they are going to lean on with the truth and get themselves back down to whatever weight is actually healthy for their body type. But does that mean that the general public has free reign on anybody who is above a certain weight class? No, absolutely not. But if, and I am saying if, the person's weight does impact, for instance, their productivity. If their weight, if they are so big that they cannot get around without help, and if they cannot do things for themselves, then we cannot call discrimination if a job decides to pay them less for what they're doing compared to people who can do their job, or a team of people who could do their job for a lot less. This is why I say we need fat acceptance. Do not get my message wrong here. We need fat acceptance, and the sooner the better. And now that I've got the backing of the CDC, I can feel even better about the fact that I started advocating for this months ago. But we have to be sane about this. We have to be rational, because this is no different than radical feminism. With fat acceptance, if we don't do it within reason, then we give people an excuse to call for exceptionalism, not equality. And fat acceptance is about equality. They'll make fashions for young, skinny beanpoles that they will not make for tall people and fat people, and that's not right. Or if they do make it, because they have to use more fabric, they have to then jack up the price for these people, and I don't believe that is fair. I don't believe that that is okay. I believe that whoever wants to look the way that they want to look, so long as, again, they're healthy, but again, general public doesn't get to make that call, medical experts do. that they should be able to get everything that we enjoy. I'm not willing to stand here and say, oh, well, I've been mostly naturally skinny most of my life. Uh, and I've had an overweight person actually be discriminatory against me because I was too thin for them. But I digress. Equality, yes. Exceptionalism, no. That is the kind of fat acceptance that I will advocate for. We need to go case by case basis and treat people for what they are, not for what we think they are. And I know that that's already going to be easier said than done. But if we don't start, if we don't try, things like fat acceptance will never happen. And I just cannot accept that. No pun intended.